Hello, everybody. Thank you for waiting that entire 3 minutes. My name is Chamchi Gimbap. I am the political fish, and you're joined for an absolute treat today. I'm with my best frenemy, James. Would you like to introduce yourself, James?
I can do. My name is James. Just recently turned 21, and was a Conservative voter. Left the party in 2016. Now rejoined to stop the absolute Brexit loons taking over. I just get the bullet from both sides. So that's all I need to say.
And of course, our independent adjudicator for today is Mr. Swiss.
Hello, I'm Captain Switzerland. I am one of those Brexit loons that Mr. Fielding was referencing, and I also dish out the bullets from time to time as well. But today I am going to be your independent adjudicator for this debate. So the plan is I'm going to step in if things need fact-checking, if they get particularly heated, or if we just need to move on getting stuck on a particular point. But otherwise, I'm going to be fairly hands-off with you guys going at it. Would you like me to recap the poll that we did on Twitter?
Indeed. So
yes,
if you could recap the poll and state the first proposition, please.
All right, then. So we offered to the viewers on my Sunday stream last weekend to suggest what they would like to see Chamchi and James Fielding debate. So I put up a poll on my Twitter with some of the suggestions we saw in the side chat. They were railway nationalisation, capitalism versus communism, is Corbyn a good leader, and does neoliberalism work? I was somewhat constrained by the limited amount of characters I could have for each option. So I can now reveal that the winner with 36% was does neoliberalism work? Followed by capitalism versus communism on 28%, and then railway nationalisation and is Corbyn a good leader, roughly tied. Although, as it was pointed out to me by some, the overall question, does neoliberalism work, is somewhat vague. So I thought what we'd do is sort of combine the two together, capitalism versus communism, does neoliberalism work, and just have a flat-out battle of the ideologies, Labour versus Conservative. That probably seems appropriate for the both of you here today, given that each of you support each party. Okay. So the proposition I would like to offer you, and this is going to be in the vein of I'd like you to discuss the policies of the two main parties. That's the rough area I'd like you to be on. But the proposition is a Labour government would be better for the country than a Conservative government. For and against.
Who would like to go first? I mean, I can go first if you like.
You can go first, ladies first, Chamchi.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Hey, if you don't mind, I'm a fish. Yeah. So what I'd like to start you off in is a brief history lesson on exactly what happened since 1979 when we had the election of the Iron Lady, Margaret Thatcher. Obviously, it was a switch over from Keynesian economics to the economics of Hayek, which meant based on kind of traditional liberal economics, it was deregulation and privatization. Now, there were some little gifts she put in there for the working class, such as a share program she put out there. And she was also putting out there that, you know, it's all about the individual and not about society. And of course, that if you left everything down to the market, it would be better for the consumer. However, there were some issues with this. Out of the all the shares that were offered to the general public, only 9% were actually taken up by unskilled male workers, compared to 50% of professional males. Privatization of the energy companies that we've seen recently, they've putting their prices up faster than inflation. In fact, since 2007, between 2007 and 2013, their profits had increased by to more than 1.1 billion, which is an increase of tenfold in the space of 6 years. And I don't really need to tell you about the public transport system, because that is just, you know, a right bloody nightmare on all sides of the fence. No, well, maybe if you're not a shareholder, that's for sure. And let's face it, as I mentioned before, if you're of the working class, then you're not a shareholder. Now, what has this meant for everybody else? What we've seen is with this neoliberal kind of ideology carrying through, we've seen a massive kind of increase in inequality throughout society. Now, this is normally measured by the Gini coefficient, and I actually have a quick slide here that I'd like to show you, if possible. So I just
the adjudicator will allow this. This is permitted.
Thank you very much. So I'm just going to share my screen, get rid of that, and here we go. So now the Gini coefficient is basically a way of measuring inequality within a society. Now, so a society with a Gini coefficient of 1 is the most unequal, and a Gini coefficient of 0 is the most equal. Okay, so if we look here at Gini coefficient between 1961 and 2015 and 16, if you look at 1979, which is there, it's hovering between 24 and 26. And you look between 1979 and the end of Thatcher's reign, you can see there a massive increase in inequality. Now, how does inequality affect society generally? Now, what you can do is you can look at the research done by Richard Wilkinson and the kind of work that they did. You can look at how health and society problems are worse in more unequal countries. So this would affect life expectancy, math and literacy. What I'll do is I'll just enlarge this a bit more for you guys. Infant mortality, homicide, imprisonment, teenage births, trust, obesity, mental illness, alcohol addiction, and social mobility. So, and if you can see there, the UK is actually one of the worst in, these are OECD, so the top countries in the OECD. So with high income inequality, the worse these things get. And this is to show how society problems are not related to average income in rich countries. As you can see, it's not related at all. Health and social problems. Okay, then we have child well-being. It's better in more equal rich countries. And this goes on. Levels of trust, much worse in uneven societies. Again, UK just behind Portugal and US there. Then we've got mental illness, prevalence of mental illness, one of the highest in the charts there, just trailing behind the USA. Drug use, much higher, just behind the USA again. Life expectancy there in years, much lower compared to somewhere like Sweden, Japan, or Norway. Let's see that Japan is way off the charts. Infant mortality, much worse. More adults obese, and also child obesity rates are also much worse in the UK. Educational scores, much worse in the UK compared to more equal societies. This just goes on and on and on. And this is something that was, sorry, go on.
I was going to say, Champchi, would you possibly be able to summarise where you're at in the next minute or two? And then I was hoping to get maybe like an opening statement from Mr. Fielding. So if you could sort of tie this into why you believe a Labour government would be preferable to a Conservative government.
Well, inequality is something that was brought in by Thatcher as a Tory leader through the use of, deregulation and privatization. Now, where I think, obviously, it would be silly to think that, oh, if Labour were in charge during the 80s and 90s, things might have gone a lot different. I can't say that. But going from the future, if this is what the jumping off point is, it's hard to see how anything can get any worse. Seeing that a Labour will try and reverse these, nationalise anything I believe that is deemed to be a service, then I think that moving on today, especially in our post Brexit Britain, and reinvestment in our local and national economies, that the Labour Party is really the only party going forward from today. But I just figured that a brief history lesson in the kind of society that we are in now and where we need to go in the future. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Thank you very much for your opening remarks, Mr. Champchi Gimbap. Mr. James Fielding, you have 5 minutes to lay out your pitch of why a Conservative government is preferable to a Labour one.
Well, I'll keep it short and sweet, actually. The Labour Party of 97 till 2010 arguably did a lot of good stuff. So I will concede I'm not like anti-Labour as a general rule. I will praise some of the policies that they did do. I think with the Conservatives, I think what I would say is one of the main policies I believe in is lower taxes, lower corporation tax, lower taxes for the working class. The Labour like to project themselves as the working class party, and that's, I don't really believe it. I think the Conservatives are. In 2010, between 2010 and 15, the coalition government, what was heavily criticised, wrongly, I believe, were they put policies forward for the lower tax threshold from £4,000 to, I think it was £11,000. It was between £10,000 and £12,000 anyway. So that took the people in the working class, people who didn't earn enough money, took them out of tax. Now, surely that should be something that was congratulated. The Conservatives, well, if you look back in Labour, Labour's borrowing, well, Conservatives' borrowings were sky high between 2010 and 2015, but the deficit was down. Arguably, he said they'd removed the deficit by 2015. That was a bit of a stupid thing to say, but the deficit is going down. Labour likes to think that because the debt's going up, well, of course the debt's going to go up because you're going to have to borrow money to bring the deficit down. Going back onto Thatcher, I was born after Thatcher, obviously, but speaking to family members who are Labour voters as such, they had mass respect for Thatcher because even though her policies might have not been, she believed in her policies, if that makes sense. She thought that the buy-to-let scheme. My dad bought his house thanks to Thatcher. He used to own a council house, and he could arguably now buy it. The only problem was, and one of my big criticisms of both the big two main parties, and why I believe we should have, well, not a new party as such, but a party that has its number one priority of building more homes. Because the problem we have in 10 to 15 years' time, you're going to have people like myself who are in the age bracket between 18 to 25. When they start to look to buy their first home, they're too expensive because there's not enough houses. Now, I think I saw a comment by Bionic Bert in the Twitter comments before saying discuss the bedroom tax. I'll just briefly talk about that as we're talking about Conservative government. I'm relatively support of the bedroom tax. It's like quite of a wow comment, but when you have when you have one person living in a 3-bedroom house which is council owned, surely that isn't right. Now, you could make the argument that you could build more houses, meaning there'd be more houses for everyone. That's true, but the time now we have people who are living we have one person living in 3-bedroom houses, or surely they should be asked to leave the house or be taxed on it. So it's offered to people who need a 3-bedroom house. I'm not sure if Champchi agrees with me on that, but is that not a sensible policy? Arguably, people who are disabled and such need a second bedroom to host their disabled equipment. I have a friend who is on dialysis and he has to have a second room in his flat because that's where his dialysis machine goes, and that's fair enough. I don't think I have no problem. They shouldn't be taxed, but when you have one person living in a 3-bedroom house, why do they need 3 bedrooms for one person? Surely they should be taxed on it, especially if it's a council-owned property.
James, sorry to interrupt. Just in fairness, since I did the same to Champchi, if you could get round to summarising your point, and then I can have you two go at it against one another.
Okay. Well, simple point is the Conservatives would be a better government than the Labour because they would keep taxes down. Lowering the taxes help the working class. Simple as that. If you're raising taxes, it's all right saying you're going to raise taxes for the top 10%, but it won't go like that. No Labour government has ever just raised taxes for the top 10%. Labour have always raised taxes in council tax, or they've made a new tax up. So my main point is back a Conservative government because lower taxes mean the lower working class won't have to be penny pinching anymore. So that's my argument.
All right, thank you. Well, we've had our opening statements from both of our debaters here today. Champchi making an argument on inequality and Mr. Fielding speaking about taxation. Now's the time for me to shut the fuck up and hand it over to the two of you to start tearing apart each other's points and discussing them. Okay. So I will jump in here and there when needed, but otherwise I will leave it to the both of you.
Okay, I have a couple of rebuttals there. Now, you say that it's down to the Conservative Party, as you say, they're traditionally a party of low taxes. Now, I'm not necessarily against low taxes. I mean, provided you've got an industry to actually fall back on. But the problem with the Tories is sooner or later you run out of national industries to sell off, and which is the situation that the UK government is in now. Now, you cannot have both. You cannot have an industry-less society and having low taxes, because then you're also in a situation where you're actually not getting enough tax receipts or enough kind of trade receipts to actually run an economy. Hang on, I'm not finished yet. Enough to run an economy. Then you have to actually cut public services. The NHS is on its knees. There are the public schooling system is on its knees, where people are actually having to request for toilet paper and donations from parents to actually make sure their schools are able to run. They're actually doing a 4.5-day week is actually being rolled out in a few constituencies to try and make up the shortfall. And of course, the infrastructure needs major upgrade, especially roads, internet and communications. Moving on to the bedroom tax. Yes, again, in theory, you're right. It's not right that a single widower will be living in a big 3-bedroom house. Of course, I mean that's a silly argument to make, but you need to actually investigate exactly why is that person still have that 3-bedroom house, and are they looking after a disabled person where they have to keep their extra kit in a spare room? Is there a carer living on the property? Is there a child away at university? These are the things that also need to be looked at. So then just because you have a spare bedroom for X amount of time doesn't mean that should be taxed. I mean, there are other ways of addressing this, and just to slap a tax on it is not necessarily the right way to go about it. And again, this comes down to another situation where you had the mass sell-off of the right to own of the council properties back in the 80s and 90s, yet that housing stock wasn't replenished. Then you end up having like mass gentrification of areas where people have lived their entire lives. You're splitting up communities, you're splitting up families, and I'm sorry, there is definitely a moral issue there too.
Right. You said something about taxes. Well, after 2010, the Conservatives lowered taxes for corporations. Mm-hmm. I'm right in saying that, right? Well, tax receipts have gone up since then. So lower taxes does mean higher tax receipts, as proven in the last 8 years. Lower the corporation tax, higher tax receipts. Quite binary in most countries we live in. You go to other countries, there's reasons why the United States have lowered corporation tax, so they'll get more high tax receipts. So
can I request a citation for this, please?
I can find. I'm just on my phone, but I can link something. But it is true. Well, I'm saying it's true. My point is, when I try and find it, is since 2010, tax receipts have gone up. Have I got a spanner? Do I have a spanner?
I don't
have
know.
a spanner.
I don't know. James, can you write something in the side chat and I check?
1 sec. Oh. I don't have a spanner, so we'll have a spanner.
Oh, right. Okay, okay. Cool. I'll give you one now.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. Done.
Let me just copy the link in. Give me 1 second, just make sure it's the right thing. Yeah. Paste. Right, so I've just linked something that basically saying how much tax receipts the country has earned since it's gone from 2002 to 2018, but if you look at it from 2010 to 2018, you will see that tax receipts have gone up.
Shall I screen share this, given we screen shared Champchi stuff as well?
Yes.
Would that help us here? Sure. One moment.
So I'll go through it briefly. It's a screen share up.
It should be Champchi. Can you click on me just to bring it up for everyone?
Sure, no problem.
So if you look briefly, so if you go from 2010 to 2011, you will see that in 2010 it was 36,176, and now in 2017 to 2018 it's 54,604. That's a increase. I think it's around 50%. Tax receipts have gone up since 2010. So just to prove my point that's all what I wanted to prove my point was, lowering corporation tax. Lowering taxes will increase tax receipts. Also, lowering taxes will help businesses employ people. Employment's the best since the 1970s. Employment's at record lows since I think it's 1972. Something like that.
At approximately 4%. Yeah, 4%.
Yeah.
But we've had this discussion before, and we're also seeing a massive increase in the use of zero hours contracts. Massive increase in exploitation and erosion of workers' rights, even worse than it was in the 2000s to 2010s, especially exploitation of care workers. We're seeing a diabolical use of those tax receipts. They're not being used for things like an NHS, such as fixing the infrastructure within the UK. It's got one of the worst internets. It's got one of the worst quality of roads. The potholes are absolutely atrocious. So I'm asking you, if tax receipts are up, then what exactly are they doing with all that money?
Well, you could make it. Well, NHS spending's up since 2010. Not as much as previous government, for granted.
Yet satisfaction has gone down.
Yes, but satisfaction was at its highest under Tony Blair, who
in 2010. He was at his highest, and it's gone nothing but towards the floor ever since.
Yes, I would accept that. I think one of my main criticisms of the NHS as a whole, it doesn't really spend its money well. This is one of my problems when any government says, right, we should spend £20 billion more on the NHS. But what exactly is that £20 million going to? The Labour Party like to slag off the Conservatives for not spending money, but when they do, it's like, oh, well, it's not enough. It's never enough for the NHS. That seems to be one of the main gripes.
Well, they're obviously spending it in the wrong places.
Well, exactly. I've said before, the NHS should have a massive full audit and cut out many of the middlemen.
Why do you vote Tory again?
Because I believe the Conservatives are the better government. I don't believe the Labour Party would cut out the middlemen. They'll just throw more money at it and hope it works. They say mud sticks, but money doesn't stick, and money doesn't stick within the NHS. You could throw billions and billions of pounds at it, and it wouldn't work.
So I wonder, and my question to you is, what is the post-Brexit future of that the Tory party, or that you get from the Tory party? Because as far as I'm concerned, there isn't a post-Brexit vision for Brexit.
Well, it's quite funny you actually speak to a Tory Remainer. I'm one of the rare breed. That's one of the reasons I've joined back, to vote against the so-called hard Brexiteers in Morg, Gove, etc. Because I believe them sort of people would just crash us out on a no deal and would do no good for the economy would crash. And so if we get a moderate-ish Tory leader, Javid, been mentioned, Dominic Grieve has been mentioned also, if we get people like him in charge, get us a decent deal, I believe that we have to leave because for the sake of democracy. I don't want to leave, but we have to leave for the sake of democracy. People voted, get on with it. But if we end up with no deal, then the worst thing could happen after that is a Corbyn government, because you would have a no deal, and then you would have mass spending when the pound would go down. It's all right saying we'll manufacture anything, but we don't have the people to manufacture it. If you speak to the average British person, they don't want to be manufacturing. They just want a nice, easy job, paid a decent wage, and that's it. They don't want to be working hard, and that's why fruit pickers are men from the EU.
If I can jump in very quickly, I'd like to offer James the chance to ask Champchi a few questions, because I think thus far we've had the questions mainly coming from Champchi. So if we just sort of have it flowing both ways a little bit. Now that you've answered Champchi's point on Brexit, is there something you'd like to ask him?
Well, I was just going to ask what's his post-Brexit, well, not his post-Brexit vision, what's Labour's post-Brexit vision, and how would that solve the Northern Irish border? Because anybody I've asked never seems to really be able to answer how to solve the Northern Irish border. So what I will first ask is,
do you want my personal idea, or do you, I mean, as far as I know, they haven't got a position on it as yet.
Well, okay, so what would be your ideal post-Brexit version, and how would that then, going into the second question, how would that then solve the Northern Irish border that no one seems to be able to answer on any side?
United Ireland is the hard and fast one, isn't it?
Well, yes, but a United Ireland, first of all, would take years to accomplish, and second of all, if you had a border poll, there's no chance of it being guaranteeing that the United Ireland would win. So going back to it, if we had a border poll and the Northern Irish people voted to remain in the United Kingdom, what would happen then? It's all right saying have a border poll in the United Ireland, but there's no evidence to say that they would win. There's a few polls that are 50-50.
Okay, well, in this situation, so this hypothetical, I really don't like working in hypotheticals in a debate, but I will allow this for this question. Right, in the future, we're out of Brexit, so this time next year, say, and with regards to Northern Ireland, we say, okay, Labour's in power because there's going to be a general election in November. So
we'll see.
Won the general. Yeah, I know. So there's a Labour in power. We're out of Europe, and there's we're coming up to the conference, and during the conference we say, well, the only way we can really sort it is if we say, United Ireland, it should be up to Irish people to deal with Irish issues. Right now, if so there's a referendum in Ireland, and they have a referendum on whether there should be United Ireland or not, and no wins, there isn't going to be United Ireland, so it's then up to them to work out the border issue. Okay, so it's not our issue. Obviously, I would like us to. Hang on 1 second. Yeah. I would like the Labour Party to work with Northern Ireland in ensuring that we don't encroach on the Good Friday Agreement, and make sure it's good for all parties involved. But in a post-referendum Ireland, I would then assume that the ball is in their court.
Mm-hmm. So you're leaving it to the Northern Irish government for example. But there's no such thing as a Northern Irish government at the moment. It's been 600 days
Oh,
since.
yeah, of course. But this is it. We're working in hypotheticals, and hypothetically, there could be a government by then.
Yes, but you would have the DUP versus the Sinn Féin. They wouldn't work together, especially on something like at the border.
Can I propose this in a slightly different way? I'd like to know what both of your thoughts are on the existing, not hypothetical, but the existing proposals offered by the Labour Party and the Conservatives. Whether you think either of them come up to scratch with it, whether you think no one's got a clue, just sort of what both of you think of both the main parties' proposals for Brexit and Northern Ireland specifically.
Well, first of all, just a little dig at Labour. Did they even have any position on Brexit? It seems to change depending which part of the country Corbyn's in. If he's in Sunderland, he's very pro-Brexit. If he's in London, he seems to be very liberal on Brexit. But I don't know what Labour's policy is on Northern Ireland. It seems to flip-flop day by day. The Conservatives' policy seems to be no hard border, no sea border, because, well, they have to, because if they did, then the DUP would just vote it down, as seen in 2010, well, not 2010, in December of the year. It seems to be keeping in some common rule book what would keep us technically in the single market, the customs union, meaning there'd be no need for a hard border. So I think that's probably the most sensible choice. I would keep us in the customs union, because unless there's another way we can solve the Irish border, I'm not sure if Labour have thought of something new.
I don't think any party's worked it out. Succinctly,
No,
I don't think any party knows exactly what's going to happen. If you say in a customs union, but that's not going to work with the EU. So no, I don't think either party's worked it out. And I think now we really need to, obviously, the Birmingham speech, when it comes to a post-Brexit vision, obviously the Birmingham speech that Labour put across didn't really cover, well, it didn't cover the Northern Ireland issue at all, but it did cover the building it in Britain, open up an investment bank that could be investing in SMEs within the country, and they can kind of take a transforming the economy approach, and moving on from that. There was an interesting article I noticed in the Guardian today with regards to how our economy, with the state of the inequality that we've seen skyrocket since Thatcher's term as Prime Minister, as I mentioned earlier, that our economy does need reshaping and reforming, and making these movements, as we've discussed before, is really the kind of thing that Labour are looking to the future for a post-Brexit Britain. Granted, the Irish issue will need to be tackled, but we have the conference coming up, and I'm sure that'll really add to putting some meat on the bones on the Birmingham speech, and it will look at possible solutions thereafter. The Irish issue, it is a bit of a stickler, but yes, I don't think either party has got it sorted.
I'd like at this point, since we're kind of covering quite broad subjects here, I'm going to ask another question of the both of you. It seems on the issue of Brexit and the Northern Ireland border, both of you seem to be in broad agreement that at present there isn't a silver bullet for solving it from either party. Or at least not anything that's overly obvious. What I next wanted to ask you, because towards the beginning, Championship Gimbap, well, he's mentioned many times about inequality in the country, and I know that James Fielding has spoken about the Conservatives bringing the lowest earners out of taxation. So I'd like to get both of your thoughts on what, for James being the Conservatives and for Championship being the Labour Party, what each of these parties does for the working class, for the poorest in society, for the people on the bottom rung of the ladder. Why you believe that the party that you're advocating for is the best for these people. And I'd like to come to James first, because Champchi just spoke.
Well, quite simple, really. They help the working class out by lowering taxes, taking them out of taxes. Conservative councils, the lowest taxes in the country. Simple that, more job opportunities since 2010. record unemployment. More people lower class are in work. More ethnic minorities are in work. More disability people, more people who are disabled are in work. So more than ever, more people are working for a living, earning money. And if you don't earn enough, you don't pay tax. So it's a win-win for me, really. Granted, any government's not popular, any government's not perfect, but going the Labour route would increase unemployment, would increase taxes on the lower people. So back the Conservatives because you have record unemployment and low taxes. So that's my argument for anybody whenever they say the Conservatives don't do anything for the working class. They do. They take the lowest out of earning tax and its record unemployment in 42 years.
Okay, well, I'd now like to hear from Champchi. If we could possibly have it in this order, I'd like to hear from you what you think from the Labour Party is good for the poor and the working classes, and then, as Mr. Fielding's done, but in the inverse, what you think is bad from the Conservative Party in regards to these. So the good from Labour first, if we can.
Well, there are a number of things, and not just taxes. I mean, a tax generally is a way of, I see it as a way of wealth redistribution, really, and it's a way of so it's got to be progressive, and you know, if you use kind of infrastructure in society, there should be a certain amount of tax paid. Obviously, if you get paid above a certain amount. Now, James talks a lot about taxes as if that's the only way that you can actually redress this matter. Now, I've heard whispers in the past of Jeremy Corbyn talking about maybe you can have a ratio on the highest and the lowest being paid. So for give you an example, in the 1970s, the ratio of between the highest and paid in between the CEOs and the lowest being paid, for instance, was about 40-1, and that's, you know, the high end. Now on the high end, it's around 400-1, and on the low end, around 150, 160-1, and that is an actual, absolutely incredible way, you know, absolutely disastrous, really, when it comes to addressing inequality. Now, and this is essentially what they do in Japan. I mean, they have a very low tax society, but they tackle inequality through you know, having these ratios. Now, Jeremy Corbyn's also spoken about, you know, because in a post-Brexit Jeremy Corbyn, socialist country, I don't like the fact that you're giving me the Labour spiel. I would like to say left wing, or would be better for me, I think. I know it's a bit late in the day to be saying that, but so the left-wing way of looking at it, would you, if you're picking up a government contract, because we'd have this National Investment Bank set up for reinventing our economy, not only would it improve the quality of work, because yes, granted, more people are in work, despite the fact, as was picked up by G. Whistler, that, you know, that these figures are calculated. Not only the quality of work, because we have more people that are poor in work, you know, and have food poverty than ever before, whereas before it was, you know, people on benefits. Also, getting rid of bullshit jobs, as mentioned by David Graeber. And, you know, there's nothing worse than being in employment where your job could literally be automated tomorrow, or you would, if you didn't turn up for work for a week, nobody would really give a shit. So getting rid of bullshit jobs and actually having quality employment, and so a high paid industrial kind of future for green industrial vision for Britain. Now, all I can hear from James and the Conservative Party is a race to the bottom when it comes to the in-work poor, the squeezing on the middle class, and basically just being these high share-owning CEOs living off their dividends, and everybody else doing, as David Graeber would say, bullshit jobs at poverty wage. And I think our economy needs completely updated. It needs to have, you know, a lot of green taxes, so carbon taxes put on the dirtiest of industries, closing of tax loopholes, which would be difficult outside the EU, granted, but I'm sure we'd be able to work closely because it's one of the things that we both have in common and we both want to eradicate. And I hope that measures like this would actually come close to closing that net. Just going back to the ratio thing, with regards to government contracts and setting up at the start of government SMEs and maybe going off into cooperatives, localized cooperatives, is to get this investment, you would have to guarantee that there's no more than say like a 20-to-1 ratio between the highest and the lowest paid, and that will pick the bottom up as things become and get more as society improves. I hope that makes sense.
If I may jump in quickly, I understand we're looking to finish at around 4 o'clock. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. That's right, yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, I want to let you guys go at it for another 10 minutes. And then just before we finish, I've got one final question, sort of as a bit of a closer for you guys. But anyway, to Mr. Fielding to respond to Champchi there.
When you say tax loopholes, you do know, I think the Conservatives have done quite well in the past 8 years closing tax loopholes off. Granted, they've not closed all of them off. I think it's about £8 billion that goes out of the UK exchequer.
Just quickly. So, George Osborne actually going on TV and say, if you want to evade tax, there are actually some quite complex financial products out there that you can take and you can buy that will help you evade tax in the UK or avoid tax in the UK.
Well, tax evasion, I'm sure tax evasion isn't illegal. Am I right?
No, it's not illegal. It's actually written into law. If you've got enough money, it's not illegal, but it's unethical.
Well, yeah, we can have a debate about ethics another time. But what I will say is, tax loopholes. I think it's about £8 billion that goes out of the country through tax loopholes. So, for granted, it's not a lot of money in the grand scheme.
It's a lot more than that. Or maybe okay, through tax evasion, maybe, but avoiding tax is a lot more than that.
Mm-hmm. So what I would say is, of course, people not paying tax is morally wrong. I pay tax, you pay tax, etc., etc. But the Conservatives are doing something about it. Granted, there's always going to be a loophole for anything. It's like people on benefits. There's always going to be a loophole around stuff. You're never going to really fully close off these tax loopholes. So what I would say is, it's all right criticising the government for not closing enough tax loopholes, but you're never really going to be able to close them really off. I don't know if you would agree with that or not. I don't know if and of course, leaving the EU wouldn't help that anyway. It would draw businesses out of the country anyway, meaning we won't generate enough tax. That's why it's important we get a good deal that protects businesses and not leave ourselves with no deal and businesses would just fuck off and go somewhere else.
What's the Tory plan to alleviate the in-work poor?
What do you mean by that? Or
in-work poverty?
Well, the plan is, I think it's for a national living wage. It's saying that the national living wage isn't the greatest thing to do. One second. It's just on the call, but what I will say is, of course, the problem is if we increase wages, like the minimum wage, for example, employment would go up because businesses who are paying minimum wage would have to let go of a few people because they can't afford to keep them on. So if you increase the minimum wage, now I think it's £7.47 or something like that, or £7.50. So if you increase that to, I think Labour's policy is £10. So if you increase that to £10 in every age bracket, you would have employment would go up. You'd have retail companies who would just be getting rid of mass amount of people because they can't afford to keep them.
Well, if you can't afford to, as far as I'm concerned, if you can't afford to have or to pay your staff a living wage, this doesn't matter what the minimum wage is, but if your company cannot afford to pay your staff a living wage, then as far as I'm concerned, your company is not viable.
Well, every company in the UK has to pay the minimum wage. The minimum
but that's
wage.
not a living wage, as you'd already just discussed. You've already admitted that
Yes,
it's not a living wage.
they have to pay the minimum wage. I don't know if I think it's a living wage. I'm not sure what the living wage is. I think they have a living wage in London, and that's about it.
But it can be localized wherever. I mean, it's what it is in London is very different to what it is in Surrey. Is very different to what it is in Cornwall. Very different to what it is in certain areas of Manchester. Central Manchester will be a lot more expensive than the outskirts. You know this, right? As far as I know, you're doing a Theresa May around the issue and doing a bit of a dance, aren't you, mate?
I saw that by Corbyn today. It was a good day by him, to be fair. But what I will say is, no. I don't know if they're living. Of course, my first job, I was paid the minimum wage. I think it was like £4.50 an hour to work in quality save. That was for a 16-year-old at the time. But I was working 10 hours a day at the weekend for like £80. Now, £80 as a 16-year-old is great. Don't get me wrong, but obviously when you're older, it's not. That's what I wanted you to say. What's your opinions on 0-hour contracts? That was the last question I just wanted to ask you. Because I'm quite supportive of them as a general rule. I think I was discussing this with somebody a few weeks back that maybe they're not great for people who have to pay a mortgage or something, because obviously it can fluctuate on the hours. But I'm not sure if you're supportive of them or not.
Not really, no. They need to be regulated if they're going to happen. I mean, because they are workable, but it should be down. The power should be down to the employee. If an employee is working part time, it should be down to the employee whether they choose a set amount of hours, say maybe 15 or 20 hours a week, or they want to go on a 0 hours contract. Because then they can the shifts they can take or leave as they come by. They could be a part-time carer for an elderly relative or whatever. Now that's essentially my view. And also, if you are on a 0-hour contract, you shouldn't be penalised for that, and so you should be paid the going rate as any other. You should be paid a living wage, not again a minimum wage. This is my problem with minimum wage: is it tends to become a target than anything else, and so there is a race to the bottom and to hit that minimum wage ideas. So that's when you need to bring back, collective bargaining and things. And I know Callum has actually spoken about this in the past. Now, my question to you would be, before we go any further, would be how are the Conservatives looking at dealing with technological unemployment?
What do you mean by technical? Say that again. Technical. I can't mispronounce it.
Technological unemployment.
Yeah. So, in what way?
So as we go forward, technology will set to displace more and more jobs. In the next 5 years, you're looking at a lot of transport jobs, and HGV drivers will be made technologically unemployed, and that's millions of people in the UK. In the next 10 years, you're looking at most service industries where they work on the phone. That'll be, well, I suppose in the next 5 years, sorry, you've seen that that Google conversation where AI makes an appointment over the phone for a hair appointment. These are industries which are on the way out.
Yes, but
and so what are they doing to address technological unemployment?
Well, I think when it comes to things like that, there's always new jobs arising. I'm sure.
Yeah, but the ratio is at minimum 1 to 10. So for every 10 jobs are displaced, one new job is actually created, or some estimates are as bad as 100 to 1. So for every 100 jobs that are displaced, only one job is created. I mean, that's one hell of a ratio.
Can I suggest for this, rather than what the specific policies of each party might be, because I'm not awfully aware myself whether either of them have any serious proposals.
I don't think so.
What the proposals of both you, Mr. Fielding, and you, Mr. Gimbap, would be faced with this issue. If you were to come up with your own solutions, I imagine from slightly different ideological positions, what would you do to try and alleviate this potential burden?
I agree. This is more of a left versus right thing.
Yeah, I'll let you go ahead first, Chamchi, on this.
Okay, so the first step is, you would do tests and research into UBI, where it's been pulled off in the past or where it's been shown to work in the past. Obviously, if it hasn't worked in certain areas and people have voted against it, such as in Finland, I believe, you then need to find out why. There's also, I know that the Labour Party is looking to do trials into universal basic income in certain areas if they get into power. Now, moving on from that, you'll be looking at universal basic services. So these are services that will basically cost nothing to run. This will be in the next 5 years. So you're looking at transport. Transport should be free. Local transport should be free, bearing in mind that it would be running autonomously and it would be on renewable energies. I mean, there's no reason why you can't have a solar power bus running people to town and back during daytime hours. Also, trains, I mean, they run on the track. There's no reason why that can't be autonomous or run at a much lower expense. TV, internet, this kind of stuff, especially internet, really doesn't cost a lot in maintenance when it comes to actually running itself. So a mixture of a UBI and a UBS, so universal basic income and universal basic services, will be the first step when it comes to actually addressing this. In the short term anyway, technological unemployment.
All right, we're getting a little bit pushed for time now. So, Mr. Fielding, your response, and then I'll ask you both your final question.
I'll just, with UBI and stuff, if you're saying that it's, like you said before, it'd be 10 jobs for one person, how will we be able to afford 9 other people unemployed with this UBI? It'd be millions of pounds, billions of pounds chucked at this UBI. Who's going to pay for it? Are we going to have to borrow? Are we going to have to borrow money? Are we going to have to raise taxes as such?
Okay. Well, basically, what you do is you do away with the entire welfare system, and
so
that actually replaces the entire welfare system. And it actually because a lot of money goes into things like means testing and actually taking people to court and things like that, where they've been cheating on their welfare, even though it's very, very little, it's very, very expensive. And it actually does replace the entire welfare system.
I wouldn't
and actually
necessarily
the management of the welfare system, and it actually comes in at about 25 billion less a year.
I wouldn't necessarily get rid of the welfare system for this UBI, because there's many people who claim up the welfare state for things like housing benefits, stuff like that. So would that be funded by the UBI then? Because it'd be absolutely mass billions of pounds going in. I'm not even sure how big the welfare state is now. Added on top of this UBI stuff, we're talking in the billions of pounds.
You didn't listen to me what I just said, did you? It will replace the entire welfare system. Now, obviously, we need to address the housing. We need to address the housing crisis first. We need to have a mass house building. There needs to be sod millions in the next 5 million in the next 5 years. There needs to be, a lot more equal to what was done post Second World War. But
I did listen. What I was saying was if you replace the welfare state, you would still have to find the money. So I'm not sure how much the welfare state is. Say, for example, just using a hypothetical number here. So say it's £50 billion. I'm sure it's much more, right? You'd have £50 billion. Now you'd have to plus that as well with the UBI as well. God knows how much that would cost. No one knows a figure. So you could be talking in the hundreds of billions of pounds you'd have to find the money for. Now, who is going to pay for that? Is it going to be the taxpayers who will be paying tax, or will we be borrowing that money? Now, that seems my only gripe with it. It sounds a great policy, saying with socialism on paper it sounds great, but in practice, not so great. What I would say is it's all right saying we should have this universal basic income. First of all, has it ever been trialled anywhere? And if it has it worked well? I think it was trialled in Finland and they got rid of it after about 6 months because it didn't work as well as they thought it would. So we'd obviously have to trial it in certain communities first and see if it would work. Removing the welfare state altogether straight away would not work at all because it's not been trialled anywhere. So that would be my answer to your question. The UBI sounds great, but would it actually work, and has it worked anywhere?
Like I said, it would replace the welfare state. So you don't get rid of the welfare state and then have UBI. There will be a rolling change, a bit like they did with universal credit, and it will be state by state. But obviously, yes, you're right. There do need to be trials, and that is something that I believe the Labour Party will be talking about at this conference this year.
Right, guys. We're coming up to 4 p.m, so I think now's a good time for me to interject. Before we wrap up, I want to ask a slightly interesting question of the both of you, and I hope you will be sincere in your answers. I would like each of you to name an overall policy or an overall direction which the opposing party has, which you are actually a fan of, or something that you think they've done good or will do good. So, Champchi, I want something nice about something the Conservatives have done or are doing. And Mr. Field, yeah, I know. Yeah, this will be tough. You know what? I'm going to let James go first, so you can have a moment to think about it. Really back your brain, Champchi. Yeah. And Mr. Fielding, the same from you. Something good from Labour's present set of proposals.
Oh God, probably housing. They seem to be the only party at the moment who are dedicated to build more houses. I think it's 1 million by 2022, but whenever they come in power, they said they plan to build 1 million houses.
Over 5 years, 1 million over 5 years, so 20,000 a year. Oh, sorry, 200,000 a year, sorry.
So, that's probably because that's been my main gripe with the governments in the past 20 to 30 years is not built enough houses. So if any part is going to plan to build more houses, I can get behind that. So that would be mine.
All right, thank you very much. And Champchi, something good that the Tories have on offer. Is it possible to give me an answer?
I'm still thinking, mate. I'm still thinking.
I can give you a get out of jail free card if you really can't think of anything. I've got one for you that I'm sure you'll agree with.
Keeping Theresa May in power as long as she has done, because she's just a fucking idiot.
That's not a sincere answer, Champchi. Right. Champchi.
All right, okay, go on.
Come over here, Champchi. I've got one for you. You ready?
Yeah, go on, mate. Go on, yeah, go on.
All right. Say Sajid Javid allowing them to use medicinal cannabis-derived products.
Oh, yeah. So I've got one. Yeah, Sajid Javid allowing medicinal cannabis products. Yeah, that one. Cool.
Well, there we go. I'm so pleased. I'm so pleased that the both of you could reach across the ideological divide and shake hands at the very end. Right. So there we go. That's my piece done anyway. I think we're towards the end of it. So, Champchi, it's your channel. If you want to, I'm handing the reins back to you.
Yes, I want to thank you to James Fielding for joining us, and of course our independent adjudicator, Mr. Dimbleby himself, Captain Swiss. Thank you, guys. What did you think? What we could do is we could do a straw poll or something. Tell us who you think had the best points. Anything you want to talk about further in further videos. So yeah. Thank you very much, James.
Say thank you to yourself, Champchi, for allowing me on. It's been a long time coming. Actually, I think we discussed this a few weeks ago or a few months back. Actually, we were going to discuss. But it's been nice to have you on anyway. Nice to put myself forward.
Okay.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I just realised the screen's been fixed on Swiss for about the last half an hour. I've just changed. I'm terrible at that. But yeah, thank you, James. I know you've got to go, but please both you stay online after. Thank you very much, guys. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to look through the side chat, but I did see a couple of good points rolling up, but I didn't really want to bring them in because this was something that me and James wanted to talk about, and it was very much our own shit throwing contest. So yeah, excellent. Thank you very much, guys, and I'm signing off. Say goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye.